Hello, my name is Lisa Shea. Today we're going to work on a watercolor letter W. We're going to do this with pencil and eraser and then trace it with a waterproof pen and ink and then paint it with watercolors. I started out with the 3 pillars. I had some audio problems, so you don't get to watch me draw the 3 pillars, but I think you get the sense of drawing the 3 supports for the letter W. And then I am going to do some vines, I think, to connect the supports. I'm doing this for an uncle of mine who is a woodworker, and our last name for the family is Waller, which is a W, so I grew up with lots of W's everywhere. So I'm going to have some vines connecting from here. I think up to this level. Yeah, I think that looks like a nice level for a letter W. Have some flowers up there. Alright, put some leaves and things on this. So let me know if that's working better, guys. Hopefully I have fixed the problem. Alright, some little flowers in here. Alright, what kinds of things should I put up in here? He likes to sing. I'm not sure how to represent singing. Well, let's put some of the portholes that I like so much in here. Get some vines going through. Over here. You could put more pillars up here. Or not pillars, but more portholes up here. But I don't want too many of them everywhere, so I think I'll just put an internal section like this. So there's going to be a flower there. Put a butterfly over here. So we've got space over here to work with. Alright, so we got a butterfly. Let's put a bird over here. Alright. Got a bird, we got a butterfly, we got some pillars. We got some vines. Let's add some curls in here. Alright, that's a good start. So we've got a basic shape. Actually, with the W, there should be some up parts. So here, let's put some vines in this direction too. Up from the outside edge, up towards that. Alright. I like that. Alright, so a letter W shape. And I suppose here I said that people find the other medieval ones to be a little complicated, and then I drew one that is sort of complicated. But I think it's because I grew up with the letter W all my life, so I wanted something a little interesting. Right, so once you've got the pencil shape done, and you are happy with that, it's time to switch to your pen and ink. I'm using a Sakura Jelly Roll 06, but you can use whatever waterproof pen that you want. This just happens to be what I have on hand. The key is that it has to be waterproof. So when you start doing your water part, it does not smear with the water. So now we're going to trace over the pencil lines so that they are darker and more visible. There's a style in watercolor where you only have the pencil lines so that it's more subtle, and you could certainly do things that way if you want to. I happen to like the pen and ink feel to watercolor designs. So I hope you guys are doing well. Pen goes down wet. It may seem fairly dry, but it actually goes down wet and it needs a little drying time. So I'm rotating things so that where my side of my hand is resting on the table, it's not going to smear against the ink. I have to be careful like this when I put my hand down while the ink is still wet, that I don't end up running it and smearing it. My hand is a little shaky, so I do like to steady it on the table while I'm doing these kinds of drawing things. But my two options are to keep rotating the paper to make sure I stay off of the existing ink, or to wait a while before each set of things I draw. And since we are doing this on video, it's better not to sit there and wait for long swaths of time for ink to dry, because that's not very exciting to watch. little leaves. So I hope you guys are doing well today. Having a nice day full of calm and relaxation. I find watercoloring to be very relaxing, that I sort of just go off into my own zone where I'm focused on the lines and the colors and so on, and let the other things in life just fade away for a while. And that kind of calm meditative relaxation then helps you with everything else that you're doing, because it gets you a calm, focused energy for all of your projects. I'm going to try to get to this inner thing over here without smearing any of this other ink that I have on the paper. Alright, got the portholes. For some reason I love doing those portholes. Got these vines coming in and out. Alright, so do the butterfly. I think I will not do the heads of the blossoms in black, but I will do those with layered watercolor paints. Alright, so we got a butterfly. Got this flower here. We got a bird. Oh, some leaves. Alright, I think I have got everything to form the basic lines. Alright, so the pencil stage is done. The pen stage is done. And now we go on to the watercolor painting stage. We're just giving it a second to dry, because if you start smearing around wet ink with water, it will smear. It's good to give it just a moment to set before we start doing the next stage. Alright, so I'm going to do this, like I said, for my Uncle Blake, who's a woodworker. So I'm going to do the outside of the pillars in a nice light brown. I'm going to do the leaves in green. So I think the other complementary color I want to use is going to be Well, let's do a blue. Alright, I have a bunch of brushes here, but I usually will just use one brush or maybe two brushes if I need a tiny brush for the inside of things. I don't want to use too tiny a brush on everything because then it takes a long time to paint things. But I don't want to use too big of a brush because then it's hard to get into all the little leafy kinds of details. So I tend to choose a brush like this size, which is a 5. That has a good tip to get into the detail areas, but a good enough size that doing these bigger areas isn't going to take an eternity. And for water, I have a 2-bin water thing. The bigger one is for rinsing off the color off the brush so that all of the dirty ink or paint gets taken off here, and then this is for fresh water, so that way when I'm taking fresh water to start painting something, it's not all muddy. That keeps the colors clean. Alright, so we're gonna start with the brown, I think. And do the outsides of these shapes. So if you have always used watercolors from pre-made tins, this is in essence the same thing that I'm doing. It's just that I buy my watercolors in tubes because it's cheaper that way. And then I squish the tubes out into this middle tin, and then they dry out just like they do in those pre-made tins. And then that's fine. And then when you're ready to use them again, you just re-wet them again. And this way you get to choose what colors you have available to you, the colors that you personally like to work with. If you decide after a while that you really just don't like one of the colors, then you stop filling that square in with that color and you fill it in with something else that you might like better. And if you keep using up the pink all the time, that's fine. You just keep refilling the pink. You don't have to buy a whole nother new pan of preset colors just to get more pink, which was the problem I used to have, is that I would use up certain colors and not use up other colors. But it's completely fine for watercolors to dry out. That's the way watercolors work. They dry out and then you just rehydrate them and they are wet again. When you are working with watercolors, think about layers. Every pass that you put down is a layer. It's adding down a certain amount of pigment color to your paper. The more layers you put down, the more pigment, so the richer the color, but also the more that it's blocking light from being able to get to the paper. And part of the beauty of watercolors is the light of the room going through the layer of pigment, bouncing off the paper, coming back out at your eyeballs. So the lighter the layers, the more light gets through and back out to your eyes, and so the brighter the image seems. The more layers you put down, the more light you're blocking and the darker that section of the image seems. So it's all a balance. It's all up to you. You are sort of painting with light and painting with colors, which I enjoy immensely. Alright. This style of watercolor is meant to be fairly two-dimensional looking, so we're not trying to make realistic apples or pears or that kind of thing here. But it could still be nice depending on exactly how you want this to look, to have it a little darker at the bottom and a little lighter at the top, to give that kind of organic feel that there's lights and shadows happening. In general, I tend to envision the light source in my pictures coming from the top right. It's just the way I tend to think, which would mean that any shadows would fall on the bottom or on the left. But you can paint yours whatever way you want to. And if you want, you could just make the color all consistent across the entire piece, and that is fine too. It's good when you work with a set of watercolor paints to make yourself a color key. So you take a piece of watercolor paper and you paint each of your watercolor colors onto it. Here's my cat Zuzu coming by to say hello. Hello, Zuzu. Zuzu, you're standing right between me and the painting I'm trying to paint. That makes it hard for me to see what I'm doing. You are so helpful. So, no, please don't step on. Did you really just step on the watercolor paper? Luckily, she did not seem to smear it. That's just the way she rolls. You're a very good kitty. Hello, good kitty. Now we've got some cat hairs on the paper. Good kitten. Come over here, sweetie. Come right over here. Alright. Trying to keep the cat from coming over. Clearly it's a battle I was not able to win at the moment. No, sweetie, I didn't want you walking in the wet watercolors. Come over here. Zuzu, yes, you are such a good kitty. No, you can't lay down there. That's exactly where you can't lay down. Come over here. Alright. I've gotten the paper. I am trying to fend off the cat with my elbow while I'm trying to paint over here. Alright, so that little bit of fending actually gave the brown a chance to dry, which is good. So now I'm going to work on the interior color. Oh, so we were talking before about making a color key. So that looks like this. So you paint each color down, and that way you can see what each color looks like. My cat is coming back to nuzzle again. I know, you just want to be a part of things. That is alright. Now she wants to chew on the brush for a minute. I found it's better just to let her chew and get it out of her system. And then she will go lay down somewhere. Right, sweetie? But not right here. Come on, sweetie. Right, so make a key so that you know what colors look like when they're on watercolor paper. It makes it easier for you to plan and work on projects. Zuzu is just being extra attentive today. Come on, sweetie. Come mention that she's being extra attentive today? No, no, no. You can't lay down on the watercolors. And she's back again. Oh, sweetie, you can't keep stepping on the watercolors. All right, let's see if that works. All right, interior is going to be blue. I've got a bunch of blues. And I think I'll go with phthalo blue, which is this one right over here. If you don't have this many colors right in front of you, it should be reasonably easy to mix up colors from a few base colors. So you don't need to have all the different shades of blue right here in front of you. You should be able to take a base blue and other base colors and make the blues that you want. But I just find it a little easier when I'm doing these online sessions to be able to quickly grab the blue that I'm after, so that you guys don't have to sit and watch me doing color mixing. But it's up to you whether you want to have a few colors or more colors, how you want to handle all of that. So again, just because of the way I want this to present, I'm starting the brush at the bottom when the brush has the most paint on it. And I'm working my way up toward the top so that the top ends up being lighter. But you can do yours however you want to do them. It's also important to remember that watercolors go on darker and they naturally dry to a lighter color. So be aware when you're painting that the paint color that you see when it's wet is a darker version of what it's going to end up being, and that is okay and natural. And then you just put on another layer or 2 or 3 or whatever to get it to be the desired darkness in the end. But hopefully you can see that even just on this pass, at the bottom of the pillar is a darker, richer color than the top of the pillar, because the paint just naturally became less and less potent as I worked my way up the pillar with the same brush. I think I'll put a tiny bit more over here. You see again, this is the hole. It dried a little lighter, and I'm putting in a little more to get it to be that darker tone. Alright, so we got blue in there. We want to make those portholes blue? I think I will. Put blue in the portholes. When you're designing the colors for your painting, you want to think up a color theme that's going to work well for what you're after. You generally don't want a giant cacophony of all sorts of different colors, because then that gets hard for the eye to take in. It's good to come up with a theme of colors that work well together and to work on those. For petal-y kinds of things, it's good to put in the petals as separate entities and let them dry, because then that helps them present as different shapes rather than being one giant blobbed shape. Alright, so we'll let those colors dry. Still wondering why it looks so dark over here on this side, but I suppose that's alright. Alright, I think this bird, often I'll do the bird in blue, but I think this time I'm going to do the bird in gold. Mix things up a little bit. It's one of those things about painting. People might say, oh, you've gotten really good at painting an octopus. You should just keep painting more and more octopuses. But for most artists, the idea of just painting the same thing over and over and over again starts to get a little boring after a while. Sure, you can be obsessed with it for a while, and that's great and wonderful as you perfect it. But often there comes a time where you say, okay, I want to paint something else. Now I'm interested in painting jellyfish or dolphins or something. Try something new. What happens if I try it this way? Or what happens if I try it that way? But I suppose Monet painted lots and lots and lots of water lilies to see how they looked in different lights and so on. But to be fair, he was always painting a new scene, in the sense that the light would be different, or the pattern of the lilies would be different, or the dappling of the shadows would be different. So that's the sort of thing that one tends to look for, is what makes this particular version special. Alright, so we got some blues down. So now I'm gonna work on some greens for the leaves. When you're doing colors like this, where they're in other areas with adjacent colors, try to make sure that the adjacent colors are completely dry before you go in here, because if you have a wet paint and you're painting against something else that's wet paint, those two wet areas will tend to merge together and form a lake. And that's generally not the look one is after in this kind of a painting. So make sure an area is completely dry before going in and painting near it. So like, I want to make sure this gold is dry. before painting the butterfly body. Add some more petals. It's good to make additional petals a little lighter or a little darker or something so that they can stand out a little better as being separate. Otherwise, again, it just sort of looks like a big blob of color, which is not really the look one is going for with flowers in general. I still want this bottom pillar to be a little darker. Darker on the bottom and then moving up to be a little lighter at the top. And the same thing over here. All right. I think I also want a little bit of detailing in the wings. So I could switch to a smaller brush, but really the tip of this brush should be completely fine, because it's got a nice point to it. Just be able to add some little blue dots. Okay, add a little dot for an eye here. Speaking of dots, I often put in little dots of decorations around the edges of my letters. I think I'll do that. Now I could do them in gold, which would be bright, but I think I'll do them in copper. I keep a little bit of copper here, just in the general palette area, to be able to do this kind of little bit of detailing. So this stuff right here is a metallic copper. I'll just add some little dots. They'll be subtle because it's copper against brown, but they'll add just a little bit more detail here. All right. Alright, so it might even be hard to see on the video, but there's just a little hint of shiny copper dotting around the edge of the brown areas. Makes it a little fun. And so I think the petals of the flowers are all fine. You know, while I've got this copper, I think I'm going to add a little copper center to each of these flowers. Little copper dots. So this is where you have to sort of rein yourself in at some point. Say there's only so many things. Have a little copper wing to the or the bird here. Just little subtle touches. There we go. All right. So there we have a letter W done in an illustrated style. Sort of a medieval style, but sort of more of a naturalistic style because of the person I was giving this to. Sign it. I'll put a pencil down in here. So there is an illustrated medieval style letter W. Let me know if you have any questions about making a W or any other letter, and have a wonderful afternoon.